The return of the gods is an event that is prophesied by every ancient religion on the face of the earth. They all talk about a time when the old ones return, when the ancient gods that once ruled this earth will return for the final age of mankind. A new golden age where mankind will be upgraded and changed into something else.
It's most important that each new generation born on Summerhour be made aware that here the old gods aren't dead.
Old gods on new streets.
Now there's this certain time when these constellations are aligned. Open the gate and let the old gods, those are the demons, come through.
In this new golden age, the ancient gods will live among men, on the earth, in control of the earth, just like it was, known by Christians and Hebrews around the world as the days of Noah, and by the Atlantean Age, or the Golden Age, by everybody else. What you're about to see has never been seen by the public. As far as I know, this has never been played online. It's an old presentation by Dr. Thomas Horn laying out exactly what's about to happen. The quality of this video was very bad and the audio was very difficult to hear, so I remastered the audio and tried to clean up the visuals a bit because some of the information you're about to see has never been seen before.
Symbols are powerful. Did you know that? Especially to the occultists, symbols are very powerful. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. I want to talk to you about words and symbols. I want to talk to you about dates and all kinds of mysterious things like that. I want to qualify some of this in a moment. This is something for which I've been interviewed by U.S. congressmen, including Congressman Bob Ney, by U.S. senators, including U.S. Senator Rod Grams, by the History Channel, by dozens of radio and television shows, and even by members of the 33rd Degree Free Council themselves, and they have not refuted one time. I also believe that these forces can be powerful. Do you believe that we war against occultic forces? And do you believe that they also sometimes can be powerful? They can be persuasive. Timothy gives us that example where Moses withstood by the Egyptian magicians Jannes and Jambres. And Moses is sent by God to go and stand before Pharaoh, and he takes a rod with him. And he gives him miracles to support God's demand that he let his people go. And if he doesn't, this plague or that plague is going to happen. And yet here are these magicians in ancient Egypt who can mimic most of the miracles that are performed by God at the hand of Moses. They can be very powerful. We also learn in Revelation 13 that when the Antichrist and the beast appear, they will have the power to call fire down from out of heaven at their command. Occultic forces are in the world. They can be very powerful, and here is the mystery. They also seem to know something about times and dispensations, and that is quite a mystery. The example I give there is where Jesus went into the valley of Gadara. And the wild men of Gadara come running up out of the caves. These demoniacs come running out of the cave, and they say to Jesus, "What have we to do with thee, Jesus, thou Son of God? Art thou come hither to torment us before the time?" And this is the Greek word kairos, which means a fixed time, an epoch that is waited for. In our terminology, we would call it a dispensation. And for you pastors and preachers that are here, there is a fantastic sermon here waiting for you to preach it, because number one, they know something about times and dispensations. Secondly, they knew that that time had not yet arrived. But thirdly, they know when it does arrive, guess what? The King of Kings and the Lord of Glory is going to judge the dead and the living. He is the one that has the power. I could tell you a story of a demoniac that I don't have time to tell. It was the only case when I worked with a team of exorcists some decades ago, but it was the only case in which I ever saw actual laws of physics being broken, things that I simply could not understand. A young man running towards us and leapt through the air and hit an invisible wall, literally just slammed into something and hit the ground. But this was the cool part. The minute that happened, there were 40-some people who were standing there. Every single one of them fell to their knees and raised their hands. You know why? Because for the first time in their life, they saw undeniable proof that there is a God in heaven, and seated at his right hand is a man by the name of Jesus Christ, and every principality and power must bow before his authority. These powers know something about times and dispensations. All right, because of those points, they're in the world. They're powerful. They can be persuasive. They are warring to control what decisions that are made by pharaohs, by presidents. Egypt's Pharaoh is our president. They are warring for their mind. They want to control them. They want to take them somewhere. They want to take them, obviously, in a direction opposite of what God would have, either that executive level or even the people of that nation follow. And slowly, the process of gradualism, the drip, 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 where over a slow period of time, we are taking away from preaching the Bible, Pastor Hoggard, that fantastic point you made last night. When you change the DNA, you change the body. And the body in this nation has been changed. The church is dying. We are no longer reaching 25-year-olds and younger have had their worldviews more shaped by Star Wars movies and George Lucas and Hollywood than they have by the church. And so they're persuasive, and that's what they're out to do. They're out to persuade a generation, but of what? And here is a great mystery. I was doing research on something else, and I came across this book. The book of the Kumiel, the council book of the Yucatec Maya. This interested me because the Yucatec Maya had converted to Christianity following the Spanish invasion. And they still technically refer to their prophet as the Chilambalam, but the Chilambalam had converted to Christianity. And the Chilambalam started developing ideas around the Christian final judgment. And he came to believe that the prophets of his culture, who were forecasting a future in which their God would return, was a false setup for the Christ of Christianity and his appearing, and that something was going to precede it. In our theology, we would understand that entirely, wouldn't we? The coming of the Antichrist, a time of great deception. So I came across, this was academic research. The professor here, Richard Luxton, as far as I know, isn't a Christian. He had made himself a friend of the Yucatec Maya, and he was hoping that they would allow him to interpret some of their ancient books into the English language. And so he was doing academic research with the Yucatec Maya. The Maya had written this 500 years ago, and it contains prophecies concerning the future. So I started reading this. Make a long story short, I thought I found something. I thought I found something nobody had ever found before. And I'm not one of these guys, like in the New Testament where they're always running around trying to find some new thing. That's not me. But I thought I came across something, and it was connected to the year 1776, the year 2012, and more importantly, in my mind, it was connected to the founding of this country and the Great Seal of the United States, and a prophecy held by the Freemasons in which they believe that their God is going to return at a future moment in time. That grabbed my interest. But before I said anything about it, I thought, I have stumbled into some deep occult work here. And these guys are scheming something. And whether I believe it or not, they believe it. And because they believe it, it can affect the course of our nation. It can affect the course of law. When you get up among the elite, the power behind the power. The president stands up and gives a State of the Union address, but it's written by somebody else. And there are people behind him that are fashioning his words, like George Bush standing up and twice in his State of the Union referring to the angel in the whirlwind.
But because we hold beliefs beyond ourselves, when this spirit of citizenship is missing, no government program can replace it. When this spirit is present, do you not think an angel rides in the whirlwind and directs this storm? The story goes on, and an angel still rides in the whirlwind and directs this storm.
And a few weeks later, one of our senators standing before the U.S. Senate and praying to the angel in the whirlwind to take a charge and control of the future of this nation. The angel in the whirlwind is known in Masonic circles. It is Enoch, basically, turned into the most powerful angel in heaven, which is very much central to their occultic and mystical beliefs. That's why I started out saying words are powerful. When people say words, most of the time, especially when it comes from DC on down, it means something. And it may mean something what they call sato, under voice. They're saying something to somebody else out there, but they think the public is going to receive those words as having a different meaning. It's occultic. And so I thought I found something. So here's what I did. Did you know that in the ancient Zohar, the 700-year-old Zohar, which is one of the most important books of Jewish mysticism, Kabbalah, magic, he said, did you know that besides, their commentary on the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible, that in a section called Viera section, which includes a subsection called Signs Heralding Mashiach, that is, the coming of the Messiah. And whenever he comes, they are going to accept a false Christ. Do you understand that? Why this was important to me was because what was ringing in the back of my mind was an even older prophecy, an 800-year-old prophecy that was also made by what I consider to be an occultic figure, a Catholic mystic. A man by the name of Malachi O'More Gare, also known more commonly to the Catholics as Father Malachi. And Father Malachi, 800 years ago, went to Rome to provide an update on his diocese to the Pope. And while he was there, something seized him, according to the story. Something came on him, and he began to write down what is now famously known as the Prophecy of the Popes, in which he listed every pope that would ever exist from the first to the last, beginning at Celestine II to what he called Petrus Romanus, Peter the Roman. But look at what he said about Peter the Roman. He'll arrive during a time of tribulation, and then the city of 7 hills will be destroyed, and the terrible judge will judge his people. So an 800-year-old Catholic saying almost exactly the same thing as 700-year-old Jewish mystics. They were prophesying the coming of their Messiah, who in our mind is the Antichrist. This guy is prophesying the last pope, the 112th pope. Well, guess what? Benedict XVI is the 111th pope. The very next pope, according to this prophecy, is Petrus Romanus. And last week, people were arrested who were plotting to assassinate the pope. At any moment, you could have the fulfillment of these pagan prophecies. Now, I don't put these on a par with the Bible, but why is this happening? Why did one culture, Jewish mystics, believe their Messiah would arrive, and a Catholic, and by the way, even some apocalyptic Catholics believe that the final pope will be the false prophet of apocalyptic literature, that the false prophet on this side will point the world's religious communities to the political figure on this side who is the Antichrist. And you're seeing the culmination of two, one 700 years old, one 800-year-old prophecies that are coming to pass at this very hour. Well, what happened then was a pattern for me began to emerge. And with my background in exorcism, this had special interest to me. I wondered, what are these spirits up to? What are they doing? What do they believe? Since spirits know something, both the good ones and the bad ones seem to know something about dispensations. What are they plotting? That's what this kind of started turning in my head, based on partly what I'll show you again in a moment from the book of the Kumiel. But so I decided, all right, I'm going to do a little bit of research. There's also a series called The Lost Symbol Found, which was when Dan Brown came out with his book, The Lost Symbol, talking about a Bible that is hidden in the base of the Washington Monument. We spent 6 hours explaining why there is a Bible that is bound in a stylized magic 666 square in the base of the Washington Monument, and what that mysticism means from their own Masonic writings. So in any case, something began emerging to me, and I was curious about it. I'm Curious George. I'm Curious Tom. That's me. Always been kind of a stinker as a little boy, and when somebody said, don't go there, I went, oh, see what I just did? Across. And don't think that I haven't been spanked by God plenty of times, so you don't need to come up and rebuke me. In any case, I thought a pattern was emerging, so I kept digging. I found Monument 6 in Tortuquero, Mexico. And Monument 6 tells us that when that moment arrives, their underworld god, Bolon-Yakteku, is going to return, followed by 9 support gods that represent the planets in our planetary system. And I don't know where Noah went, but Noah, it sounds just like they're describing an invasion of Earth, like a giant UFO, because all of a sudden something descends very rapidly upon the earth. Is that going to happen? I don't know, but I know that the Bible tells me men's hearts are going to fail them for fear for seeing those things that are coming upon the earth. And there is a time of great deception and a time of lying wonders that could cause the world to accept what? An intergalactic Messiah, the return of the gods, the return of the Sumerian god, something that could be extraordinary, beyond our comprehension, that could cause the masses of the world to panic and fall down in subservience to what we think of as the coming of the Antichrist. Anyway, that's what Monument 6 says. So I started looking into other cultures. I wanted to know, is it just Mesoamerican? I found out that the Hindus had focused on the same thing in the Hindu Kali Yuga calendar. This is the age of the male demon, and they too saw that the earth would go through catastrophic changes. Then I found here in the early Americas, 200 years ago, the Cherokee Indian tribe in a whole series of apocalyptic prophecies. They too began to prophesy the return of their feathered rattlesnake god. These are called the Cherokee Star Constellation prophecies, or more commonly the Cherokee Rattlesnake prophecies. And here's another thing for you investigators that like looking into this stuff. I want somebody to answer me why all of these cultures want to typify their god as a great dragon that has the power of flight, has the power to move through the air. The Bible talks to me too about a power of the air, and also refers to him as a dragon. And all of these cultures, the Cherokee see a flying rattlesnake god who's going to return. The Mayans see Kukulkan. The Aztecs see Quetzalcoatl, their feathered serpent god coming back from the heavens. And furthermore, as you'll see in a moment, on the Great Seal of the United States, the prophecy on the Great Seal speaks of the return of the god Saturn's reign over the earth and his son Apollo upon the earth. And if you look at ancient depictions of Saturn, he is pulled in his chariot through the sky by two winged dragons. All of this occultism. So I went back to Luxton's book, this interpretation of a 500-year-old prophecy, the Book of the Kumiel. Now, let me just real quickly, because I really got some stuff here I want to be able to say, and so I'll move through this part quickly. The point that grabbed me in this was that the Maya had recognized a direct link between the number 13, which is so important to our country, 1776 and 2012, in cycles and illustrations in a way that academic Luxton thought mirrored prophecies of the Christian Last Judgment. They mirrored prophecies of the Christian Last Judgment because the Chilam Balam had become a convert of Christianity, and he was speculating about what does all this Mayan stuff mean to him now as a Christian. It is pointing towards the coming of a judgment that is defined in the scriptures, in which there is going to be a clash between the powers of paganism and the powers of God. When I read the Mayan translation by Luxton, here's what struck me. These elements. The final 13-step countdown of the Mayan calendar began in the year 1776, followed by 13 steps, ending with the return of their God. The minute that I read that, I said, that's describing the symbolism on the Great Seal, where in Roman numerals you have 1776, you have a 13-stepped uncapped pyramid, and numerous American historians have told us that those steps represent periods of time, over which is this ominous eye of Apollo, known to the Egyptians as Osiris, known to the Sumerians as Gilgamesh, known in the Old Testament as Nimrod. And that too is verified by all of the best academic work of the Freemasons as well as American historians. That's not a disputable fact, and it's not Tom Horn's opinion. That's what that eye represents. Combined here with the statement Anuet Coeptus and the prophecy Novus Ordo Seclorum. I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. So my first question was, were the framers of our government, and in particular those esoteric-minded gentlemen who were important to the design and layout of Washington, D.C., and iconic things such as the Great Seal of the United States. Now, don't get me wrong, there were Christians in the founding of our country, and especially at the common level, as a result of the Pilgrim movement. This was a Christian nation. This was a nation filled with Christians. But there were also among the leaders of this nation those who belonged to the secret orders. That too is a fact. And especially those who were responsible for the design and layout of Washington, D.C. As a matter of fact, you can go to our government's own website and read about the contest that was initiated for the design of Washington, D.C. and look at what our government government records tell us about the different architectural firms who offered different kind of designs for Washington, D.C., and then read on our government website about how Thomas Jefferson didn't prefer any of them, rejected all of them. Why? Our records say because he wanted the U.S. Capitol to reflect the Roman pantheon, and it even says in our government records, dedicated to all pagan gods. That's what they wanted. So that's what they shepherded, and that's what they got. And that's why you have a dome and an obelisk, and if we have time, we'll talk about that's why D.C. is laid out the way it is. That's why these elements made it onto the Great Seal of the United States. Well, what I wanted to know is, were these same mystical-minded gentlemen, were they aware of the beliefs of the Maya and the beliefs of the Aztec? Were they aware of it? And if they were aware of it, did they incorporate it into their belief system? And especially, did they incorporate it into the symbolism of the Great Seal and other important elements of Washington, D.C.? That's what I wanted to know, because I thought if I could find concrete evidence that in fact they were aware of it, and in fact that they incorporated it into their belief system, it might raise my suspicion about the design on the Great Seal, right? So, to make a long story short, let me tell you a little story. There's a man by the name of Constantino Brumidi. Brumidi became the official government painter for Washington, but Brumidi cut his teeth in Rome, where he did work for the Vatican, where he restored frescoes in important ancient Catholic churches. Brumidi, when French occupied Rome, Brumidi migrated to the United States. He became a United States citizen. He immediately went to work for the Jesuits. Well, the Jesuits in New York City were considered to be the power base of Rome's interest in America at that point. They were very interested in making sure that they played a role here in early America. The Jesuits were here to do that. Well, Brumidi suspiciously left the Vatican, came here and went to work for the Jesuits in New York City. And in 1854, abruptly, the Jesuits and the Freemasons financed a trip for Constantino Brumidi, the famous Greek-Italian artist, to travel where? To Old Mexico. For what reason? To make copious notes of the Aztec calendar stone. Upon the completion of that task, he returned to Washington, D.C. He went immediately to Quartermaster General Montgomery C. Meigs in Washington, who was the supervisor over the construction of the dome and the wings of the dome. He was immediately commissioned to become the official U.S. government painter. He moved inside the halls and the rotunda. He began painting frescoes that are Freemason in design. They have very mystical and pagan important qualities to them towards the mystical beliefs, the metaphysical beliefs of the Freemasons. But ladies and gentlemen, of all things, if you were going to paint a frieze of American history, of the tens of thousands of things that you could have painted in the famous frieze of American history at the base inside the U.S. Capitol dome, what does he paint? Nothing else but the Aztec calendar stone. And there are so many important elements, by the way, in the frieze of American history that send secret messages back and forth to the Freemasons that we could spend 20 hours, I'm not joking, just going through these paintings and pointing out different things such as Montezuma's hand gesturing down towards the sacred fire, which is encircled by that serpent that's going to return. Here's what some called an Aztec drum, but notice that it has the shape of a Maltese cross, which is the symbol that is connected in history to the empire of Osiris, Apollo, who began on Malta. The Maltese cross, of course, for those reasons, was important to the Knights of Malta, connected with Freemasonry, and the Vatican, where Brumidi began his work and found favor. But there's somebody hiding here in this image in your U.S. Capitol dome. He's hiding right back here behind this seated and standing Aztec figure. If you look at the stone of the sun, or the Aztec calendar stone, that as it might have originally appeared as it was painted, this little guy that's hiding in the U.S. Capitol dome with his tongue sticking out at the world is the god Tonatiuh. Tonatiuh is the god who demands human sacrifice. In fact, according to Spanish and Aztec records, more than 20,000 living human sacrifices per year had to be offered to Tonatiuh, who is going to demand the same on his return. In fact, in the year that they were celebrating the reconstructed temple of the sun god, the Aztecs, according to Spanish records, sacrificed over 80,000 humans that year year, a constant line of human sacrifices being sacrificed, were they unknowingly influenced by the occult power that seemed to be operating behind so many other ancient societies separated by time and distance, some of them by hundreds of years, some of them by thousands of years, some of them by hundreds of miles, some by thousands of miles, cultures most of whom we have no evidence that they had any ability to pass oral history one to each other, and yet all of them, for some reason, who worship these dragon gods, when their God will return and the earth will enter into a new age of elevated mankind. Most of them also, by the way, would speak in terms in their own mysticism, as I was talking about last night. We are heading towards a time where men are going to become demigods, according to the transhumanists, but they say the same thing in their own language. Man is going to be elevated. We're going to have a new golden age. The gods are going to return, and men with gods are going to be blended. It's all part of their prophecy. Is it part of the reason the designers of the Great Seal included so many prophetic symbols on the seal? And why put openly hidden prophecies on America's highest seal anyway? For those who are not aware of these prophecies, I don't have time to go into all of it. This is a statement. Anavet Coeptus, this was taken from Virgil's Aeneid, in which Ascanius, the son of Annius from conquered Troy, prayed to Apollo's father, Jupiter, or Saturn, Zeus. Charles Thompson, the designer of the Great Seal's final version, condensed line 625 of Book 9 of Virgil's Aeneid, which reads, Jupiter omnipotus, Adacibus Anavet Coeptus, or all-powerful Jupiter, favors the daring undertaking. He concised that to Anavet Coeptus. He approves our undertaking to conceal the true identity of the He of the Great Seal, the mythical father god Jupiter, who gives Apollo life. I'll bet you that the majority of the people sitting in this room, the women in their purses, the men in their wallets, or at least a very large number, have this prophecy in your wallet. It's on your U.S. $1 bill. Thanks to Roosevelt and Wallace, 32nd degree mystics who believed the prophecy on the Great Seal. This, according to Wallace's own records, was a prophecy about the coming of the great architect of the universe, also known as Osiris, also known as Apollo, also known in the Bible as Nimrod, and they believed that his coming was soon and that it would be heralded by a new breed of humanity. Now remember, their contemporary enemies out of Hitler had been hoping for the same thing, the Aryan Superman, the Ubermensch. We are going to create a new form of man. And they believed that prophecy was coming. Well, guess what? They were probably right. It is coming. And now our technology has caught up to our mystical dreams, and we are about to give birth to a new form of man. But did he hide this? Because when you look at your dollar and it says, in God we trust, who do you think that's talking about? Is that the God of the Bible? Well, you know, if you read, by the way, what caused the great push in America to get placed on our currency, the phrase, in God we trust, that's not really what they started out wanting. It was Christians. And they had actually said to Congress that in a hypothetical annihilation, this is their language, a hypothetical annihilation of the United States in the future, antiquaries of the future would have determined that America had been a pagan nation based on the symbols of the Great Seal and the way Washington, D.C. was laid out. Even the old-timers knew this. And they wanted something in our government that would reflect that widespread Christian view that was held among the mostly agrarian communities at that time. And it was opposed by the Freemasons. It was opposed by the President of the United States. They did not want something saying we are a Christian nation. And they finally compromised and put in God we trust because of the ambiguity related to that phrase, and that in some hypothetical annihilation of our country and somebody wanted to determine who is the God that's being talked about on the Bible, every symbol on our dollar would tell them it is Osiris. It is the ancient God, dying and resurrecting God. It is Apollo. It's he whose eye is hovering above the uncapped pyramid. That's exactly who you would determine this God was talking about. Well, here's the Novus Ordo Seclorum. That is a prophecy. It's taken from a prophetic line in Virgil's Eclogue 4, line 5, Magnus ab integro seclorum nascitur ordo. The interpretation of the original Latin being in the majestic role of circling centuries begins anew. If I have time, I'll explain that. That is a prophecy of the Cumae Sibyl, who predicts the arrival of, in the end times, of a divine son. But who was the Cumaean Sibyl? Well, she was the most important prophetess of Apollo. She is the most famous of the Pythians. A prophetess, a Pythian, by the way, is what the Apostle Paul cast a demon out of in the New Testament. When in Greece and Macedonia, and it says that the custom there was to go out in the morning and make prayers. You remember this story? And Paul and his entourage went out to make prayers, and every day the Bible says that a damsel, that is a young woman, possessed with a spirit of divination, would follow them around and say, these men are from God, they've come to show us the way of salvation. Now, interesting question. Why would a demon-possessed prophetess of Apollo do that? For the same reason the New Age movement quotes from the Bible. By the way, whenever, I can tell you this, I know this from experience, whenever these spiritual forces know that they have come up against a power greater than they are, that's you, in Christ, and you're in their community, they won't try to defeat you. They'll try to make the community somehow think they're somehow joined to you. So, but you know why? You're a fisher of men. Well, believe me, they are too. They are fishers of men. These spirits are fishers of men. And so they will join or try to make the appearance of having joined in order to draw people away into mysticism. And it's happening right now. I've never seen a day in my life. Why do I talk about this kind of stuff? Why do I talk about UFOs? Why do I talk about what is the occultism operating behind the year 2012? Because I pastored for 25 years. I was an executive in one of the largest evangelical organizations in the world for a decade. And I have never seen a time where the world is asking more questions that the church is afraid to talk about. And the young people in their churches that are asking those questions are then going out and they're asking people that are part of the New Age movement. They want answers. And if you won't answer their questions, they're going to find an answer to their question. That's why this woman was following the Apostle Paul around in the hope that after they leave the community, they could pretend they too were some part of this great power and they could somehow build up and reinforce their position. And the Apostle Paul got sick of it and done what any good Baptist preacher would do. He cast the demon out of her in the name of Jesus Christ. Guess what? Came out the same hour. And yet for some mysterious reason, the Cumae Sibyl is in the Sistine Chapel at the Roman city, the Vatican City, and she is holding a position here of honor among the Old Testament prophets. Michelangelo, who made the famous paintings there in the Sistine Chapel, he left a secret behind that I've never heard anybody ever talk about. I'm going to show it to you right now so you can follow up on it on your own. But Haggerty left us something here very important. Count the digits on the left hand of the Cumae Sibyl. Now her thumb is inside the book just like it is on this finger. And then you count her digits, 1, 2, 3, 4, and the fifth one is bent under or cut off, which could have even more significant occultic meaning. She's a 6-digited prophetess. Wonder why Michelangelo did that, because that dates back to the Watchers. That dates back to the offspring of those rebel angels that rebelled against God. But it also directly connects to Apollo, who is known as Nimrod, and the fact that he probably was an offspring of the Watchers. If we get time, we won't have time probably, but if we get time, I'll show you in the Old Testament book of Genesis where it says, and Nimrod began to be. And the Hebrew word there is Gibborim. Nimrod began to become a Gibborim, an offspring of the Watchers. Well, anyway, there she is. And yet, this woman who is held in a sacred place of honor there at the Vatican City, what is it that her prophecy that's contained on the Great Seal of the United States of America, what does it say? Well, the divine son who comes of the Sibyl's prophecy is to be spawned of a new breed of men sent down from heaven, what we talked about last night, as he receives the life of God, since he's heroes with gods commingling. This is taken directly from Greek mythology, where there was a marriage of the gods and mankind giving birth to the demigods. This is Watcher technology. This is what we're going to do in our technology. Now, let me give it to you quickly. Here's the prophecy that's encoded on the Great Seal. Am I talking too fast? The Great Seal. Now, this is the prophecy that's on the Great Seal. Now, the last age, by Cumae Sibyl sung, has come and gone. And the majestic roll of circling centuries begins anew. That's where we take the phrase, a new order of the ages, the Novus Ordo Seclorum. Okay, what's going to happen when this new world order is born? Justice is going to return old Saturn's reign. Bible scholars will tell you this is talking about Satan. Saturn is the equivalent of Satan in biblical theology. Is going to return old Satan's reign with a new breed of men sent down from heaven. Only do thou at the boy's birth, in whom the iron shall cease, the golden race will arise. Befriend him, chaste Lucina, 'tis thine own Apollo reigns. So now we know who is prophesied on the Great Seal of the United States to return. This is from which the prophecy is taken. He shall receive the life of gods, and see heroes with gods commingling, and himself be seen of them. And with his father's worth, that is Saturn's worth, he will reign over the world. Assume thy greatness, for the time draws nigh, dear child of God, great progeny of Job, that is Jupiter or Zeus. See how it totters, the world's orbed might, earth and wide ocean, and the vault profound, all sea enraptured of the coming time. All right, very quickly, there are a few elements here you need to understand. The Greeks believed in 4 ages, right? You remember this from school? There was the golden age. This was the age when the gods reigned upon the earth. After the gods departed, we entered into the silver age. This was the age of the demigods. This was when only those who had been born of the gods, what you would think of as the Nephilim, the Gibborim, the offspring of the Watchers, this is when they were upon the earth, the silver age. Then the flood came, wiped out most of those bloodlines of the gods, the Greeks believed. And then we entered into the bronze age. This is the age where there's still some elements of the bloodline of the gods on the earth, but not very much. And in Christian theology, we look at this and we say, well, you know, the flood wiped out the giants, and yet, lo and behold, how did this happen? After the flood, somehow, they're back. How did they come back? I believe there was a high level of technology that was used that's also going to be used in our age, but that's my theory. There's other kind of theories around this. J.R. Church talked about the bloodline of the Antichrist and the tribe of Dan. Other people tried to figure out, but bottom line is they came back. Somehow the giants were on the earth again, but not in the great numbers that they had been before. This is the Bronze Age, when there's very little of the divinity of the gods from the Greeks' point of view left in humanity. And then finally we enter into the Iron Age. That's the age that we are in now, where there is so little divinity left inside humanity. What do we got to do? We got to create a new breed of humanity. Exactly what the transhumanists are saying now, the mystics of old were saying the same thing. The day will come when we will need to rejuvenate, recalibrate, alter, re-engineer humanity so that once again we can be an offspring of the immortals. But why should Christians care about a Sibyl's prophecy on the Great Seal heralding the return of Apollo? Because the Bible identifies the god Apollo as the same spirit, verified by the same name, that will inhabit the political leader of the end times new world order. 2 Thessalonians, let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition. This is the Greek word Apollyon, which is the Greek's way of saying what we call Apollo. Apollia, Apollyon, Apollo. Revelation 17:8 ties the coming of the Antichrist with the return of Apollo. The beast that thou sawest was, and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit and go into perdition, Apollia, Apollo. And they that dwell on the earth shall wonder, whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they behold the beast that was and is not and yet is. This phrase is held by many theologians who believe that it pointed to either a spirit or a personality that existed on the earth, was dead at the time or gone at the time of the writing of Revelation 17:8, but who will return in the latter days to either be or to possess the Antichrist. Both the Bible and ancient records and the prophecy on the Great Seal tell us it is Apollo. He is equivalent to the Egyptians as Osiris. In the Old Testament, he is called Nimrod. If we had had time, we would have talked about this question, but how could Apollo, Osiris, Nimrod possibly return in flesh or spirit as Antichrist? But it has to do with the Cumae Sibyl's prophecy of a new breed of men, and the same thing that I was talking about Well, there it is, Genesis 10:8, and Cush begat Nimrod. He began to be, this is the Hebrew halal, which means either ritualistically, he began to change sexually or to change genetically, or it can flatly just refer to the same thing when the Bible refers to all flesh having become corrupted upon the earth. He began to change genetically, and as he did, what did he become? A mighty, a Gibborim in the earth. He immediately sets out to build a tower. His eyes were opened, like we talked about last night, to new modes of perception, what the transhumanists want. Suddenly he saw something. He wanted to build a tower whose top would reach into the heavens. Roosevelt and Wallace believed it. Here's Nicholas Roerich holding the sacred casket. Wallace was a devotee of Nicholas Roerich. I went to the house of the temple. I want to know if there was anything to this, so I went to the lion's den. I had people praying and fasting for me. I took my wife. We went to the house of the temple. We went to the headquarters of the Scottish Rite Freemasonry in Washington, D.C. on 16th Street, and not on a public tour. We went and met privately with 2 Freemasons of the 33rd degree order. They took us inside. They answered every question except one. I'm going to tell you what that question was. When we went into the sacred room there, the chapel, with its giant altar, and I looked up at the 36-paneled magic 666 square that is used during the raising ceremony to bring forth the spirit of Osiris from the underworld to incarnate him in every U.S. president. When I was standing there, I'm familiar with the raising ceremony. A 32nd degree Freemason becomes a 33rd degree. They go through this process of raising Osiris from the dead to be incarnated within that individual. But what I had been told was that ceremony was secretly conducted at the inauguration of every United States president, beginning posthumously with George Washington and extending through every U.S. president. And when I asked them if that was true, they would not answer that question. One guy got nervous and walked out of the room. The other one just stayed nervous and stood looking at me. And my wife gave me a look like, "Don't press it, buddy." I believe the greatest conspiracy of all time is sitting out in Washington, D.C. It's also here at the Vatican. This is the ancient structural representation of the womb of Isis. This is the ancient structural representation of the erectile phallus of Osiris. Your capital city is laid out as a magical construct based on ancient Egyptian beliefs for the exact purpose of raising Osiris from the dead so that he could be incarnated within every U.S. president. That's the way the city's laid out. It's also laid out that way at the Vatican. Did you know, Noah, that when Pope Sixtus went and they got this obelisk, they took it from the ancient city of Heliopolis, what is called in the Bible the city of On. It was dedicated to Osiris, Isis, and the sun god Ra. And when Sixtus the Pope brought it there, he tried to conduct an exorcism on it to cast the spirit of Osiris out of it before planting it in the center of the Vatican City. All right, there's a reason why the Washington Monument has a magic square in its base where a Bible is bound. There's a reason there's a magic 666 square above that altar in the house of the temple where I was at. There's a reason there are 72 pentagrams. In their Gnosticism, they believe 72 demons control the nations of the earth, and they have bound them at the base of the apotheosis of Washington. This is the underbelly of the U.S. Capitol Dome. It's called the apotheosis of George Washington, which means to become a god. What god did he become? Well, look at the heaven that he's rising into. There's not one Christian symbol. There's no Jesus. There's no cross. There is no Michael the Archangel. Every part of the underbelly of the U.S. Capitol Dome is filled with pagan gods. Here's the god Vulcan, whom Manly P. Hall tells us fills the Freemasons' hands with the seething energies of Lucifer. That's the heaven he went into. At his funeral, Freemasons cast sprigs of acacia upon his body to represent that he had gone into the underworld to take his role as Osiris so that the next president could become the resurrected Osiris. Well, the occult have a plan. God has a better one.
So what do you think about that presentation I just showed you? Because in my opinion, it's one of the most important presentations I've ever seen. So make sure you share this far and wide. Leave a comment and let us know what you think. Also, don't forget to hit that like button. And until next time, thank you all for watching. God bless you all.